Sometimes you get a little pissed off with the weather reports. I'm sure everyone at some point has to admit. I mean, I understand that the weather reports can never claim to be 100% accurate, and the weather can be unpredictable. But when they make a very big and colossal mistake, those are the ones that just irritate the hell out of me. I go camping several times a year, and it's one of my absolute favorite things to do. I do all of my work from home, freelance, so it's easy for me to be able to go off and do whatever I want most of the time. That means that some of the times that if I want to take a spontaneous camping trip or something like that, I can. When this story takes place, I was feeling a bit restless, so I began looking around on the internet at some of my favorite camping areas. I began checking the 10-day weather reports for all of them, determined to find one where the weather would be beautiful. In actuality, all of my areas were fine, so I just decided where I was going to go. I don't feel comfortable mentioning the exact place, but I decided to get away for about a week or so. I found myself quite looking forward to being outside and away from everything. Although I would be bringing my cell phone with me, the majority of the time I would be likely a bit too far into the country to make it work. Other than that, I would also be far away from any sort of technology and information about what was going on in the world. The beginning of the trip worked out absolutely fine. There's no real need for me to go into too much detail about it to just try and pad out the story. Just know that for the first couple of days I was out there, it was bright and beautiful. The humidity may have been a little bit higher than I would have liked it, but that didn't bother me too much. After about 4 days into my camping trip, I was hiking and headed along this very long creek. Around noontime, the weather began to suddenly change. I saw at first, creeping up over the horizon, some of the darkest clouds I had ever seen in my life, and I could tell that they were moving in very fast. Although it was far enough away that I was unable to hear any thunder yet, I could definitely see the lightning. At first, I was upset, because there had been nothing in the weather reports indicating that this weather was going to happen, but I didn't dwell on it too long. I noticed that the clouds were moving in rather quickly, and it was more important for me to go and set up my camp for shelter, even quicker than that. I had to get a bit uphill from the creek I was following. I didn't want to take a chance on having the creek flood and get me. The wind really began picking up though, as I struggled to get my tent set up. The flaps of the tent kept slapping my face and twisting around the poles as I tried my best to be patient. I didn't bother doing anything except putting the tent up, and then quickly getting all of my equipment inside. After that, I spent a bit of time outside, watching as the storm got closer and closer. The wind was blowing fiercely, and it wasn't long before the storm clouds completely covered the sky. It looked like it was nighttime already, and it was only around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When the rain began to fall, I took shelter within my tent. My tent has a plastic see-through window on it, so I was able to watch the storm from inside. The wind was so strong, it kept threatening to pull my tent straight up out of the ground. I had secured it really well, but alas, I am no match for Mother Nature. Not only was this storm fierce, it was also long. I had hoped it was one of those quick passing storms, but I soon found out that was not going to be the case. It took me through the entire afternoon and into the evening in darkness. However, it did calm down somewhat in the early night, but not by very much. I was reading while listening to the storm, when suddenly I heard something. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but it sounded a lot like a scream. I didn't think for a second that it was a loon or some other sort of animal. It sounded like a human scream. Of course, I was chilled, but it got worse when I heard it again. And the second time it was even more agonizing than the first, and louder, much louder. I wasn't cold at all, but I suddenly found myself shivering. I turned off my light. Yeah, I have to admit, in retrospect, turning off one's light in order to listen better makes absolutely no sense, but for some reason, it was what I felt like I was supposed to do. Another scream came, and this was followed by several more. I really wasn't sure what to do, but I figured if another human being was out there and in danger, I should try and go out and find them. I took my knife, the only weapon I had on me, and got ready to go out into the storm. When I got out of the tent, my nerves were already pretty shot. I had no idea what I was looking for, much less what I would find on the other end. I had only heard the screaming from while I was inside my tent, and that didn't exactly make it easy to know where it was coming from. I heard the screaming once more, and that's when I realized it was coming from the east of where I was standing. Not being in the tent, I knew now it was definitely the screaming of a human being. I followed the sound, waiting to hear it again. I wondered how far away it was. I also wondered what sort of help I could be, if at all. I heard the scream again, and I kept following the direction I was going. The last scream I mentioned was actually the last one I heard, but I had a good idea of where it had come from. I followed it, desperately trying to find out what was making the screaming. I spent a lot of time out in the rain, trying to find something, but I didn't hear any more screaming, and I didn't find anything at all. After a lot of time, I made it back to my tent all wet and muddy. After cleaning myself up the best I could, I tried my best to get some sleep. The following day, I did some investigating, trying to see if there was something that I had missed in the dark in the storm. After a lot of looking around in the area that I'd heard the screaming coming from, I found a watch and some broken plastic, but nothing that really told me what was going on the previous night. I went back to the tent to pack up my camp. When I got there, I was shocked to find that my campsite had been attacked while I was away. My tent had obviously been shredded with a knife, and my belongings were scattered about. As I cleaned up, I could only think to myself that maybe this was done by whoever had been making a person scream the night before. I didn't think it was a prank or anything, because this seemed like an awful lot of effort for a prank. Still, I found the entire thing very disturbing. I decided to cut my trip short and hike back to my car and go home. I reported what happened there, but I don't think anything ever came of it. I was walking home from school. I had this really weird school district. The town had voted for a decrease in funds for the school, and for some reason, one of the things that they cut was the amount of students who would be riding the bus home from school. Basically, any kid who was within a certain distance would end up having either to walk to school or be driven by their parents. I didn't live in town, but I lived close enough to town that I was not one of the students that got picked up by the bus. My parents were able to drive me to school, but unless I waited for hours for them to get off work, I would have to walk home in the afternoon. The vast majority of the time, I would decide to walk home, and it would take me a bit less than an hour to get there. I was in the 8th grade when this happened, and I was at the age where I spent a lot of my time alone thinking. By this time, I had quit relying on my parents to give me rides home. I also didn't really have a way to contact them if I needed one either. This was before mobile phones, and our school didn't have a payphone. This particular day was a warm spring day. I distinctly recall having PE class outside on this day, and it was quite lovely. That was up until about an hour before school got out. Around that time, while sitting in class, I noticed it getting a lot darker outside. I looked out the window and noticed that some clouds had taken over the sky in what seemed like nothing but a matter of seconds. The wind had begun to pick up quite a bit as well. I found myself hoping that the remaining school time would go by quicker than normal so I could get home before it rained. Obviously, it was a silly way to think, but I also found myself to be paying less attention to my class than I was paying to the weather outside. After school let out, things went as usual. Most of the students walked, so there were some big crowds walking home. The crowd would get smaller and smaller as most students found their own streets home. Pretty soon, it was just me. I normally take a walk home by following the roads. However, there is a shortcut through a field that I can sometimes take if I need to get home as quickly as possible. It was a big field, but cutting through it always saved me more time, and I had been waiting for the storm to break for a while. I really didn't want to get caught up in it. A scary flash of lightning, followed by a burst of loud thunder, was what convinced me to cut across the field. I wasn't one to run, but I was walking fast. One of the things I hate the most is getting rained on. so I did my best to hurry as much as I could. The hurrying didn't really help, though. It didn't take very long after I'd gotten into the field itself, when the rain began pouring down. It wasn't so hard at first. I thought I would be able to get home before it began really pouring, if I was lucky. This proved very quickly to be the incorrect thought process, though. The rain began to fall harder, and it was just a torrent in no time. I was soaked to the bone, and I couldn't get the rain out of my eyes. I began running toward the only shelter I could make out. There was this huge tree not very far from me. I ran toward it, hoping to find at least a little shelter, even though I was already soaking wet. I tripped and fell at this point. It took me a few moments to get myself back up on my feet, but the moment I was on my feet, the most frightening thing to ever happen to me occurred. It was all so quickly. Within 1 second, I saw a huge branch of lightning shoot down right in front of me, slamming into the tree I was looking for shelter under. In that moment, the tree seemed to explode into orange flashes, which were accompanied by the loudest explosion I had ever seen in my life. The force of this, or the shock of this, I'm not sure which one, caused me to blow back down into the dirt and mud once again. Once I got back up, I could see the tree was on fire. The fire, however, was going out quickly due to the rain pouring down so quickly. I stood there for a few moments, trying to take in what had happened. I mean, I had no way of knowing for sure, but if I hadn't slipped into the mud that first time, I may have made it to the shelter of the tree. And if I was leaning up against that trunk when the lightning hit, who knows what may have happened. After that, I didn't even hurry home. Getting continuously soaked by the rain didn't seem like such a big deal anymore compared to what had just happened. It wasn't really like I could get any wetter anyway. In the years that have followed, I remember this event quite often, and each time I do, it still scares me. Sometimes just a few seconds can drastically change things in your life. The scary experience that scarred me for life happened when I was living by myself in a small one-bedroom home. The house wasn't in a typical neighborhood. You know what I mean, like a subdivision where there are houses lined up and down the streets of the neighborhood. Nor was it out in the middle of nowhere either. The house was set back off a minor highway. There were other houses along the road, along the highway, but not very close together. If you had lived in one of these houses, you could guarantee that you could listen to loud music whenever you wanted and not bother anyone that lived around you. My house had a nice front and side yard. There were a lot of trees, and therefore there was a lot of shade too. It was really a perfect little house. Living alone for the first time in my life, I found myself very happy in this house. Although, I mentioned earlier that you could listen to music loud, or you could even have parties without bugging your neighbors. These were not things that I took advantage of, really. But it absolutely was the first time I had lived alone, and I wasn't prepared at first for how frightening an experience that can be. I don't mean I was scared of the dark or anything like that, but there were certain times at night, or during snowstorms or thunderstorms, when I found myself getting slightly scared, which was something I had much of a problem with before. Just one of the nuances of living by yourself, I guessed. And not only that, but the house was pretty old too, so there were these little creaking noises often at night. Despite all these scary things, I only once got truly terrified while I was living in that house, and this happened during a weekend. Even if nothing scary had happened, I probably would have remembered this scary weekend anyway. We had 2 full days of some of the strongest thunderstorms I can ever remember in my entire life. The storms began on the Friday afternoon. If you're the type of person who really enjoys watching storm clouds, these were just beautiful. The lightning, once it got dark outside, was so bright that you could see everything perfectly clear in the dark. A lot of the thunder sounded like bombs going off too. On a Friday evening, I had just watched some scary movies. Of course, the storms made watching the movies a lot scarier than usual, but up until that point, all of the fear was really just enjoyment fear. You know, like the kind you get from watching a horror movie or something like that. I didn't have a car at the time, When I went to work, I took a bus, and with how bad it was still storming the next day, I really couldn't go anywhere. I spent the whole day at home, watching more movies and enjoying the storm. That night, I had decided to go to bed just a little bit earlier. I guess 2 days of it being dark and rainy and stormy outside made me get tired pretty quickly, so I went up the stairs to my bedroom. I should have explained what my house looked like. I mentioned it was a one-bedroom house, but it was also a 2-story house. The only thing upstairs was the bedroom, though. The stairs literally went right directly to the door of the room. I went to sleep pretty easily that night. I don't know what it is about storms, but they can have a really relaxing effect while in bed. It was a sudden crashing noise that woke me out of my sleep, though. Getting up, I started wondering what that noise was. I was quickly able to determine that it was not from my bedroom, so then the obvious answer was that something had happened downstairs. I didn't have any pets at the time, so a lot of things went running through my head before I climbed out of the bed. I slowly walked over to the top of the steps, and I took a deep breath before I even thought about doing anything. "Hello?" I asked, and immediately wished I had not, but of course there was no answer. I stood there wondering what to do. Waiting a bit longer, I realized I would have to go down the steps at some point, so I took a couple of steps down. The back of my house had a sliding glass door on it. That door faced the stairs. As you went down the small staircase, the doors came into view, and when they did this time, I realized the door was wide open and completely shattered. I stopped walking down the stairs, wondering what might have happened. The storm was still raging outside, so I thought about it some more, and after having several scary ideas running through my head, I decided that I must have left the door unlocked or unlatched. The pressure from the storm must have caused it to open somehow. Bringing myself to that conclusion actually calmed me down for just a moment. I was about to step down close to the door and clean up the mess, but right before I could take the first step down, I watched as a dark figure ran from behind the staircase and straight out the back door. I'm not sure how much time I spent looking there, just staring out the door. It was still storming, and water was seeping into my house. But I couldn't even think about it as I reflected on what I had just seen. Someone had broken into my house, and I had just stood on the stairs as they did whatever they did. When I could finally move again, I made it down the stairs and went to call the police. I then went and put towels on the floor and went over to the couch, thinking about what had happened. The police figured that since my lights had gone out and I had no car, a burglar must have thought that my house was empty. There were a few items missing from the living room and kitchen, the most expensive being my iPod and tablet. Most of the other valuable things were in my bedroom, which I assumed the burglar would have gone in next had I not gotten up. I was never made aware that the guy was caught, either. I left the lights on downstairs for a long time afterwards. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, but only if you feel so inclined. As well, I also have another channel where I do true crime videos, and I have another channel I'll be starting soon where I talk about disasters that happen in history and stuff like that. I just want to start doing a bunch of stuff that interests me. As well, on this channel, I'm going to start doing once a week a little mystery type videos or documentaries on dark events and things like that I just find interesting. Maybe some strange diseases or something. Who knows, but I'm sure it'll be very fun and you guys will enjoy it too. I know I'm having a lot of fun making it, and I'm putting a lot of work into it too, so I hope you guys will like it. If you guys want to send in a story to me to read in one of these videos, please be sure to take a look in the description below. There will be links to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. You can send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type, if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Special thanks to my artist Alan. He does all of my art for this channel and my true crime channel. He also does commissions, so if you like his work, check him out. He will be in the description of the video as well. If you're curious about the music used in this video, it's always listed in the description below in the order in which it appears, so you can go ahead and check it out there as well. There will be links to the artists. I usually use Miyuji Music or Deblato Studios, so you guys can go ahead and check them out directly if you like them as well. If you have any thoughts or criticisms on this video, please be sure to leave it in the comments below so I can know what I can do to improve in the future. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.